Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. Super happy to be here with you today and really honored to have Connor. We met online. It wasn't dating, just to be clear. And we had a really nice conversation. He has kindly introduced me to some folks here in Utah that I'm really delighted to get to know. And he has a really interesting business. I'm going to call it that, but you're going to discover real soon why we had him on the program and we're super aligned. So I'll just say that at the beginning. Connor, why don't you start from the beginning?
Well, speaking of online dating, that's how I met my wife 18 years ago. That landed pretty well for me.
Good.
So thank you for having me. I'm excited to unpack a lot of this. I teach millions of kids and their parents about financial literacy and entrepreneurship and freedom. I do all this through a nonprofit called Libertas Network that I founded, where we operate a number of programs that are helping families across the socioeconomic ladder, whether you're, ultra high net worth or you're low income looking to pull yourself up and move into the middle class. We operate a number of programs. I write a number of books that are designed to share these ideas, to give opportunities to families so that they can, launch a business or get an education or learn about these things. So it's kind of a national organization. We've helped millions of people. It's honestly like doing the Lord's work. It feels so gratifying every day. I tell people I'm a drug addict, but my drug of choice is dopamine, because every day I'm getting DMs and emails from grateful parents and people sharing their stories. And who wouldn't love to be in a role like
Totally.
that? It's very meaningful, and frankly, like, we're help creating a lot of value. A lot of people are struggling to know how to talk to their kids about, hey, inflation's really bad right now. Like, we're having a hard time, paying our grocery bills. Why is inflation? What is inflation? Or on the flip side, hey, our family's doing really well, but how do we talk about stewardship and legacy and value creation? And so we try and create materials and be there for families across the socioeconomic ladder to talk about these ideas and be able to make an impact.
So let's get into the weeds a little bit. How do you been able to reach that many people? It's a lot of people.
So the bigger ways is a series of children's books that I write called the Tuttle Twins. We've been doing this for about 11 years now. We've got 36 books in the series from toddlers to teens, and they've sold almost 7 million copies, I think we're at now. We, a few years ago, partnered up with Angel Studios to create a cartoon series inspired by the book that's been seen now hundreds of millions of times. So it's made these ideas very accessible to a large number of people. There are a number of classic books that many of your audience may be familiar with. Let's say, for example, The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek, or Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, or pick your book. There's a lot of these classic books, especially decades past, that we're talking about, free markets and capitalism and wealth creation and business. Well, very few people read any books these days, let alone those books. And so with our children's books and with the cartoons, we've taken the core ideas out of a lot of these classic texts and wrapped a fun story around them and illustration and humor and all of that. And now not only are the kids learning, because these are positioned as children's material, the parents are also learning. Their defenses have come down. If I were to say, hey, here's economics in one lesson, you should give it a read.
Yeah.
Boring, not really busy, blah, 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 all the excuses in the world. But instead, if I say to that parent, hey, here's an opportunity to teach your kids about, let's say, how markets work and how they can be, create value in the future to be successful. And it's all shared through this fun little story. Well, now the parents' defenses have come down and they're eager to just teach their kid and have a fun reading moment at night after dinner. But the parent,
Are learning.
self is now learning. So that's what we're most known for. That's what's really blown us up in years past, is the Tuttle Twins. A number of our other programs are now achieving scale as well, but that's the big one.
So are there chapters of the nonprofit? Are there people volunteering? How do you finance all this?
So it's basically a direct to consumer model. I'm actually not a fan of nonprofits, generally speaking. When you remove the profit motive, it's really hard to attract the right type of wealth and value creators who can, be very efficient and scale something. The nonprofit world tends to attract a lot of do-gooders, but they don't know how to really operate and scale a business. So we chose to do it under, like, I'm an entrepreneur, but I specifically chose the nonprofit model because I hate income taxes and prefer not to pay them. It opens up philanthropy as another revenue stream to fuel the growth. And so Like Tuttle Twins, for example, last year we sold probably $9 million worth of books, and we recycle all the revenue into marketing. So it's like this engine that just keeps on going. The more people who buy, the more we can market to reach even more people. And that's a lot of our model with our different programs is we use philanthropy, and I call it a philanthropic kickstart model. So I go out to donors who have a foundation or a donor advised fund or however they've structured their philanthropy. And I say, look, you can help me. For example, like let's say I've got a donor in Houston, Texas. Well, we've got a program that helps kids start businesses, and we're doing all over the country. So I can say, hey, help us get started in Houston to launch these markets and reach kids in Houston. And then they provide the early capital to do that. We start generating revenue in Houston. And over time, I'm less and less and less dependent on donors, and we've got more of a sustainable thing that has a life of its own. So generally speaking, that's our model. It's just using philanthropy to kind of kickstart and scale what we're doing, but really trying to monetize it as much as we can. And even though there isn't a profit motive, I'm not going to, have an exit or retire on a beach in Costa Rica. But for me, it's about the mission and it's about impact. And so I can leverage philanthropy as well as the earned revenue that we're getting from the different business lines to all just fuel the growth and reach way more families.
Is there an ancillary business for Connor in this or otherwise? I mean, do you have other businesses that you're involved in?
Yeah, short answer is basically no, with one exception. The books that I mentioned, the Tuttle Twins books, as an author, I do get a royalty. We publish them through our nonprofit, but my royalty rate is less than half of market. And so we structured it that way because it just lets the excess revenue trickle back to the nonprofit to fuel the mission. So I could be a lot more wealthy personally if I were to have gone to a private publisher, but I'm doing fine. And for me, it's far more about impact and changing, to use Steve Jobs' quote, make a dent in the universe, as opposed to just building personal wealth. And so that's kind of an adjacent thing of the royalty flows back to me on the books. But everything else, even as I come up with other business ideas, I'm always trying to find a way to do them within the context of what we've built just to fuel the growth a lot more quickly.
Yeah, the question was designed around want to make sure that Connor stays interested in what's going on aside from your desire to have an impact because, you still have bills to pay, I imagine.
Sure.
That was the only
Yeah.
reason for the question.
Yeah.
Is there, we have a bunch of things to talk about. Do you have any editorial comment or anything on this Charlie Kirk business and how it relates to what you're doing? And you can say yes, and I don't want to say it, or yes, and I will say it.
So I've been on Charlie's show. A number of my donors are his donors to Turning Point. Many of my friends work at Turning Point. So there's a lot of kind of connection. Interestingly enough, I live about 10 minutes away from where he was assassinated. And at the time he was killed, I was at a conference in Dallas, 2 miles away from where JFK was assassinated. So it was a very weird week for me relating it back to our work. I do a lot of what Charlie did. He had a different and in some cases bigger platform, and we're serving similar but slightly different audiences. He was far more outspoken and kind of intentionally provocative, than I am. I prefer to kind of go, again, direct to consumer, connect with the parents, serve them, create value for them. But there's a lot of overlapping ideas. I'd say he and I probably, would agree on 85 to 90% of topics. There's a few interesting observations. Let me put it to you this way. Let's go back to the Tuttle Twins books for just a moment. As I said, we're just publishing this through our own nonprofit. We basically have built a publishing company called Libertas Press to service all of our needs. And when we started, it was just one book and then two and then a third. It was very slow over a few years. And for the first 6 years cumulative, all the way through 20, sold total 750,000 copies of the book, roughly, which was phenomenal, not only for any book, generally speaking, compared to just your average published book, let alone a more kind of self-published or independently published book. And we were very proud of that. And it was great. It was slowly kind of increasing year over year over year. 2020 hit, COVID hit, and again, the last 6 years total was 750,000 books total. In 2020 alone, we sold 1.3 million books. And so COVID, woke a lot of people up and like, what happened to my country? And how do I talk to my kids about what's going on? And oh, now I'm homeschooling my kids because the school's shut down. So it was this moment where a lot of people were looking for answers and help. And we were there to say, hey, we have answers and we can help.
Yeah, that is awesome, by the way, because people were struggling and it was a surreal event. Let's just call it what it was, right?
Very. very. And in response to your question, Arthur, I've noticed in the past week or so, there's been a similar shift. Just to speak in real time, our sales of Tuttle Twins books compared to the weeks before Charlie was killed. Let me do the quick mental math. We're running at about 6 times the volume of sales, a 6x in a single week. Now there's other variables. I'm not going to say it's entirely because of Charlie. We've been ramping up our ads. We've been optimizing all kinds of things. We launched a new sale. There's other variables in the mix, but in talking with my wife this morning, I realized, and she actually brought it up that this might be a similar kind of COVID thing, that Charlie's death has had such a deep impression on so many people that, again, parents are like, how do I talk to my kids about what's going on? I need help. Charlie stood for these ideas. I realized that I believe these ideas, but I haven't really talked to my kids about them and I haven't been intentional. What do I do? Tuttle Twin. So I'm sure there's an element there where, his death has had a large ripple effect. Personally speaking, but it hasn't been since 9/11 that I felt the way I felt when Charlie was killed.
A lot of people felt that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It just had this big social impact of like, what's going on? And maybe I know people who hardly ever even knew like his name, let alone listen to anything. And they still felt the impact of what happened and its significance in this moment. So again, I like to be the person that says, look, there's, whether it's a pandemic or an economic collapse or someone being assassinated for free speech, whatever the crisis, whatever the problem, there are solutions, there are opportunities. There are, not that you want to like take advantage of the situation, but there's always going to be crises and there's always going to be struggles. And so I like to be, and our team likes to be, a group of people that says, you're dealing with stuff, you're trying to figure stuff out. Hey, maybe we can create some value for you and help you. And again, that's where the dopamine comes in, because these people are often so grateful that, oh my gosh, I was struggling with this. And here's, a book or a cartoon or a course or whatever that can help. It's definitely fuels our ambition to serve way more people who are also struggling with similar things.
Yeah. And I imagine that some of the impact and the uptick that you're experiencing is that some parents who have had their children go deep into Discord and gaming and all that business may have heard the sound bites that may or may not be the result of the shooter, and that scares them, and that they want to, take out an insurance policy and say, well, let's talk about this, right? Let's see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Because we know that is a slippery slope. And it's not to say that gaming's bad, because a lot of people like to do gaming. But when you get influences from people that you don't even know who that are people, and they could be robots or influences from other countries and that sort of thing, it's scary for parents, I think.
It's scary in part, I think, because they're caught off guard. It's very reactionary. It's very, oh my gosh, this just happened. How do I process this? What do I do? And it's always helpful to try and have a solution or have something that can help you get through that moment and deal with whatever comes up. What I like to tell parents is we need to be far better at the intentionality on just a regular basis. As one example, I speak often at like homeschool conferences and education conferences. And one of the slides that I'll often use has a list of words of all of the things that I want for my children when they are adults. I want them to be curious. I want them to be service-minded. I want them to be critical thinkers, right? I want them to be resilient, et cetera, et cetera. So I have this list of words and I say, look, your words may differ, but let's think like Stephen Covey. If you've ever read 7 Habits Highly Effective People, I think it's rule number 2, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
So often parents are extremely reactive. It's the doctor said this, or this happened at school, or this social like event, Charlie Kirk was killed, like whatever in our lives. Parents are often just stumbling forward, constantly reacting to what's going on. How often do we sit down as parents or grandparents and say, what is the end toward which we are striving with these kids? What do we want them to be when they are adults? Okay, here's these 10 words or whatever. How do we reverse engineer that? What's the education they need? The experiences they ought to have? Field trips we could do, vacations we could go on, service, et cetera, et cetera. Suddenly you've now got the script to more intentionally program your parenting, your family life, but so few people think that way. We just get tunnel vision, and with good reason. There's just constant external pressures of
I
work.
think it's smart, Connor, because what often happens is that people are so busy running around, exhausted, not paying attention and going deep on things, and maybe not taking the time out to do as you suggest and intentionally set out a roadmap with the end in mind. I totally get it too, meaning people are busy. They got to take Johnny to soccer and they got to get up and make sure that they go to work on time. They got to make sure everything's done at the household. I mean, it's a lot when you think about it. And I think people don't have the bandwidth or energy. And so I think you have to do the intentions with intention or
That's
it'll
right.
never get done. Right.
Yep. And I like to tell them, like, internal, expectations are always different from external expectations. If we set a goal ourselves to say, I want to be a more intentional parent, right? Then, like you say, soccer or whatever errands get in the way and we forget. It's like New Year's resolutions. Like, I want to do this year, and then it just flutters away. But if you have external expectations, if you've got an accountability buddy, you get two moms together and say, hey, we want to both level up in this way. What are your goals? What are my goals? Let's hold one another accountable. Every week, we're going to have a check-in and we'll call one another out, maybe make it a little competition, when you have that external pressure, it's going to help a lot more. So again, I like to tell parents, like, don't do this alone. Find a partner, find a friend.
Find a spouse that would want to enlist in that too. I mean, that's always
For
a
sure.
plus.
Although I don't know that my wife wants to be held accountable by me to nag her for
Yeah, that's
all the
probably
things she
not a
said.
good idea. Sometimes that doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, just, the call to action here for anyone listening, right? It's just, how can we be more intentional with this stuff? I see the same thing with wealthy families. A lot of my friends and our donors, they're struggling to figure this out. What do I do with my kids? I want them to be spoiled brats. I don't want that. You don't know this yet about me, Arthur. I'm the son of an estate planning attorney. I've grown up my entire life around horror stories of what wealth has done to the next generation. Some good stories too, some very positive things, but often, horror stories. So for wealth creators, it's like they're trying to improve the world and create products and services that are of value to people. It's amazing. They're rewarded with this wealth. I'm a big champion of that. I'm an entrepreneur cheerleader. I want them to go. Those are the people I want to be capital allocators. They know how to assemble and leverage resources. We need them, 1,000 more Elons in our world. But if it's at the expense of their kids, their family legacy, like, that's not great. And so how do we help families in this position to be more intentional? How can we make sure that we're just not assuming that the kids are just going to learn about money mindset through osmosis or TikTok, right? How do we, so I know family offices and others will often have, like, human capital services or next gen kind of stuff. But even then, it's often an afterthought and it's often a shrug and, oh yeah, we ought to do that, but it's not really a focus. And so, maybe just one takeaway for anyone listening to this is, how can we be more intentional? We know what we ought to do. None of this is rocket science. I know I need to talk to my kids about these things, or we need to have family discussions about these topics. But you just got to begin with that end in mind and then reverse engineer so you can be more intentional.
And just like in business, execution is everything. Right. So you have to commit to execute on the good intention. Right. So, yeah, sadly, I traffic in really rich people and I've seen just endless amounts of horror stories, as you and your father have seen in the context of that sort of thing, and legacy, of the not planning for the legacy and people fighting and all that business. So the family meeting thing is really valuable. You just have to do it. Right. As opposed to just talking about it.
And that's often where, like, a consultant or somebody, because then you get the accountability of, like, all right, we're paying this person and we have it on the calendar. We got to do
Totally.
it. And the people I know who do this well, I'll use myself as an example. For years, I've wanted to learn how to play the drums. I'm always air drumming. I'm watching YouTube videos of drummers, but I've never prioritized it. Well, just yesterday, I told you this before we were recording, I was with some friends at a retreat. And one of my takeaways from that was, no, okay, it's time. I'm going to prioritize this. And to that point, I know that if I just go take an online course and watch some videos, I'm not going to do it. I'm busy, etc. How about I find a local drum instructor? I pay double his norm. I align incentives and say, this is the song that I want to be able to play within,
There you
whatever.
go.
six,
Yep.
12 months. If I can play this in that time, I'll give you $1,000 or whatever, right? So now incentives are aligned. He's harassing me to make sure that I'm practicing every day. And so same with these families. Don't do it alone. Find a way, whether you're going to hire some consultant or
Facilitator or somebody. Yeah.
yeah, you need outside help, not because any of this is rocket science. Again, it's not. I can't stress enough. Like, this is all basic stuff. It's how to talk to the kids about financial literacy, how to talk about value creation, designed struggle, right? How can we create an environment where our kids can not just be shielded from everything, where money is solving all our problems. We want them to actually have experiences at a young age where they are struggling in a safe way, in a controlled environment, but they need to be exposed to failure and they need to be able to practice their own problem solving. So how do we do that? Again, like, you could just pull up Chat GPT and do that yourself and come up with a plan. But oftentimes there's a lot of benefit from just having that outside accountability system in place just to make sure it gets done.
It's like going to the gym. My trainer's on Tuesday morning. I better show up and be ready, right? And when I come back, I better do what had been done, or Tuesday or Thursday, whatever. Yeah, facilitator is really valuable. I agree. Well, since we're talking about the, let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing with that uh, cohort of people, the really, really rich people, where the money is often used to solve problems, and it's a good tool. It's just, money is just a tool when it comes down to it. But what's in the offing for you in that regard? It's admirable that you've been working at a cross section of socioeconomic levels, but what's happening now, Connor?
So this one's in the works. I ad hoc over the past few months, I've been consulting with a number of ultra high net worth families, friends of mine, donors of ours, who are trying to figure this out. And so I realized after doing a number of those engagements that there's a market opportunity here. And we wanted to validate that. So we've been going to a lot of family office conferences. We went to Opal and Family Business Legacy Conference. We're going to Fox and just going around on a listening tour and saying, in fact, when I was at the Family Business Conference 2 weeks ago, I think, we facilitated a breakout. And one of my questions was like, all right, what are you using for next gen resources? For some of them were like on 5th generation, some were just new wealth creators that are on Gen 1 and 2. And to a T, everybody said they don't know of any good resources. Now, that doesn't mean they aren't out there. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means that there's a gap in the market to connect existing resources and ideas to the families who are feeling this pain. So what we're going to be building is I'm going to write a book about this to take all my general knowledge on teaching kids about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, value creation that I've been doing with all of our Tuttle Twins work, our youth entrepreneurship project, taking all that general knowledge, but then honing it in on this acute audience of ultra high net worth families where they'll be the primary audience. The middle class types and everybody else, they'll still be a secondary audience. Cause again, like, this isn't just a problem
Same
for wealth.
problems.
It's the same issue. So I'm going to write a book, which will come out sometime late next year, exploring this topic in depth with a lot of kind of worksheets and things that you could do as like a self-help thing if you want. We're then going to create a library of video resources with age appropriate learnings across financial literacy and value creation. So you got a, 6-year-old grandkid. Okay, here's a few videos to talk about what is money. How do you discuss, needs versus wants? How do you help them understand what scarcity is or what abundance is? And so we'll have, all kinds of videos like that. And then maybe for your teenagers, we'll have videos on the obvious things, opening a bank account and whatever. But beyond that, like getting into the entrepreneurial way of thinking, problem solving, identifying other people's pain and struggles, and then identifying what are those solutions. And so we'll have this big library with different age buckets so that parents and family office, learning officers and education folks can all use those as a resource to help their families. And then for the top tier, we're probably going to build a consulting practice for families who just, and there are plenty of them out there, right? They just want to write the check. They want the facilitator to come into their family meeting and spend half a day sitting down with them and guiding them through a framework or whatever. And so we'll have that as well. But as I said, it's been clear to me doing this a little bit ad hoc that there's a lot of need. I bring this unique angle, being raised in kind of a estate planning context of seeing a lot of these cases, but now having breadth and exposure of teaching millions of kids these ideas where I think I can be of service to a lot of these families to spend some time creating kind of a consolidated framework with a lot of different ideas and examples that they can execute either on their own or with our help. So all of this is to come. If your audience is, viewing this on YouTube a year from now, we'll probably be ready. But I'm excited because I think these families are struggling, and I think if we can solve for this problem, it will set so many of them at ease so that they can continue to focus on their wealth creation and creating a lot of amazing things for our world. But the mental anguish and emotional pain that a lot of them are going through and dealing with their family situations is real, and it's concerning to me. And so I don't know that we're not going to be a magic wand that suddenly fixes all these things, but we can be a resource, and I'm eager to step in and fill that market void.
If you allow me to make a recommendation and an observation,
Yeah, please.
there are a handful of people that I know, and probably a lot more that I don't, that have provided really valuable, living your best life, helping you with the next generation, really do a yeoman's job of helping rich families take on these challenges, but they do it in the context of getting paid some other way as an additional benefit of being with Merrill Lynch or Goldman Sachs family office. And the problem, and some of them do it very well, and some of them, it's just another thing to make sure they keep the assets under management. And I don't mean that maliciously. I'm just telling you that my
That's the
experience
incentive.
is, like I said, I traffic in these problems and people and know a lot of them. And I think that the advantage that you'll have and the reason why it might be successful in filling that gap is if the agenda isn't supported by some other revenue model, then it will be not only accepted by the principals in the family, but the heirs who need to benefit from this, even if, especially if they're a little older and they kind of understand conflicts of interest. But I think having sort of an independent in that you're getting paid your fee to do the work and that's it, as opposed to just make sure you keep your $300 million in my bond account. That's how I'm going to get paid for this. And I just want to be clear. I know a couple really highly skilled people that get paid that way, and they do an excellent job of this, but they're few.
I appreciate you bringing this up. From my listening tour so far, we've definitely clued in on what you're saying, where a number of these firms are, as an appendage, adding on some of the next gen thing because they've seen the problem. They've had their clients articulate the need and they think, oh, well, we got to offer this too to kind of keep the families happy. But it's not their priority. It's not their main focus, as you say. I'll be very transparent with you and your audience, Arthur, and what's led us down this path. Ultimately, I'm running this nonprofit and I'm trying to scale it up and serve millions of people. And to that end, most of my fundraising is, chasing down 6 and 7 figure checks from folks who are so aligned with our vision. They're like, hey, yeah, for my philanthropy, I'd love to help create a million new kid entrepreneurs or whatever. So as I've been reflecting in months past, I've been figuring out, okay, if I'm now talking to billionaires, which is how I spend half my time just reaching out to families like this, I don't want to be transactional. I don't want to knock on their front door of their family foundation and say, hey, please come support our, like, that's not how these people work and operate. It's not how any of us should work and operate. And so how can I lead out with value creation? What's a problem that they have that I could help them for? And look, law of reciprocity kicks in at some point. Does that mean every family we serve with this consultation practice or our book or whatever is going to partner with us on the philanthropic side? Of course not. And we're not going to push it and we're not going to lead out with it. But we're going to build a lot of relationships with people who are struggling and we're going to create a lot of value. And in that process, they're going to learn about us. They're going to learn about our other work. And if that tickles some part of their brain where they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds cool, tell me more, then I'll be there to say, oh, hey, cool, here's this,
It makes sense.
you know.
Yeah. And that allows you to build the relationship on a comfortable basis for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even if you have a conversation with a billionaire and come out and say, I'm going to facilitate this for you for this fee, and they say, no, but what else are you doing? Right. So
Sure.
it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited to see where it goes. But like I said, I think I've validated that there's a need and we'll see what we can do to step in and help out.
What have you seen, the estate planning business is an interesting business because it's the lawyers that make the most amount of money are the corporate lawyers because they get on the deals. The estate planning lawyers are getting their, $900 an hour in New York or $1,000 an hour. And the time and billing model is a pretty bad model, even though they probably make a pretty good living in most people's standards, right? Are you seeing any, being that your family's been exposed to that, have you run into any of these folks that have a unique model to help with the estate planning?
Well, like many areas of law, I think estate planning is ripe for disruption, particularly with AI. Because you're exactly right. I remember, so it's my mom, not my dad, who's the
Yeah.
estate planning
Yeah.
attorney.
Sorry.
And I remember from a young age, I would come home and I knew how much time I could see her in her office doing the work to get ready for the meeting. I'd see her in the meeting while I'm, upstairs goofing off or whatever. And I'd come back downstairs when the client left because she just worked out of our house as her home office. And I'd see the check on the counter and my 13-year-old brain would be like, what in the world? Like, how are I know how much time you spent on that, right? Because so much of estate planning, especially if you're under like 50 million net worth, is here's my template. Let me swap out the names, add a few things, and then boom, you're done. And so AI can just blow all this out of the water. And
Totally.
suddenly estate planning attorneys are just going to be doing that final 2% review and tweaking of what an AI chatbot, it's gonna ask you all the questions, tell me about your assets, tell me about your whatever, and then you're hiring a human just for the final piece. So I see massive disruption. We're already seeing it in a lot is certainly with estate planning. I think that's great because I know for a lot of people, just the cost of the attorney is the barrier to getting their
The
estate plan
barrier.
done. So then it goes to probate or it goes, and it's just a mess and people don't do it. And so this is going to be great to just, move a lot of these services downward down the economic scale so they're far more accessible. But for the professionals, it's going to have a lot of disruption. And particularly with AI. So we have, I should mention here, just for context, one of our programs that we operate is called Praxis. And Praxis is, think of it like a boot camp accelerator for young adults as a higher education alternative. So instead of going to college, you come to Praxis. Instead of 4 years, you spend 6 months with us. Instead of a murky ROI and a ton of debt, you have zero debt and a very clear ROI because we guarantee a job offer for every Praxis graduate of that 6-month program. And if we don't find them a job, we don't get paid. So we bear the burden of actually making good on this. They're spending limited time, limited money, boom, plug them in, and off they go, earning, 50 grand on average. This makes a $300,000 impact on people's lives, both from avoiding tuition, the interest from all their fees, and then that extra 3.5 years of earnings that we've just unlocked because they're in the job. And so now I got to try and reverse engineer what I was talking about when I brought up Praxis. There was a point.
Yes. Yeah. So they brought the practice in the context of the legal business
Estate
being
planning. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what we're seeing across the whole industry, because our work with Praxis focuses on entry level jobs. We're trying to help these young adults
like what?
get
Tell
a
us.
lot of like sales, marketing, ops, writing, the generalist careers where in any level company, in any industry, everyone needs help with these core things. If you're going to be a doctor, Praxis isn't right for you. You got to go, you got to get your degree. But for so many roles, especially sales, marketing, and ops, you can be a generalist like this and just get plugged right into a job, start gaining experience, and then you're off to the races. The challenge that you're seeing across the landscape right now with AI is it's cutting out those bottom rungs of the economic ladder, which is that entry level. Because now the entry level is what AI does really well with, kind of the college graduate level of intellect. And so a lot of firms are now saying, wait, for like 1% of the price, we can just now build out AI agents that can do a lot of the work that our early, picker industry, our early people are doing. Now that creates very interesting implications 10, 20, 50 years down the road. If how are people going to jump from no experience to kind of the mid-level stuff where AI isn't good enough? So there's a lot of disruption, but certainly in the legal firm. My mom's fortunate that she's now basically close to retirement, but all the up and coming folks, you're now having to figure out, okay, like, do I have to specialize in way more fields rather than niching down into one thing? Do I need to have other products and offerings beyond just churning out documents that AI can do? It'll be very interesting to watch.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed that I appreciate in discussing the nonprofit on your site is, and I can't tell you why because I just don't know. But it seems that the most recent generations have a real problem with original thought and critical thinking skills. And so I think if you just taught kids at a young age critical thinking, that would solve a lot of problems, meaning they would say, okay, I'm not going to have that entry level experience. So what am I going to do now? Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I should learn how to be really highly skilled at building AI agents and being a really good prompt writer. Right. Or
Yeah.
just using it as an example. But I think critical thinking skills is rather than being triggered saying, oh, wait a minute, that gives me a real big headache. I'm going to be, I have anxiety ridden. In my era, we just ran through walls. Not saying it was the right thing, but, it's a little different than what we expect the kids today, I guess.
This is where I get bullish because I can be and am very critical of the kind of the education system. It's anyways, we can go down all kinds of rabbit holes. I think most of your viewership would just nod their heads the whole time. We all know
Totally.
that there's massive, massive problems, but I get bullish because there's a lot of really interesting solutions on the horizon. There's, a friend of mine has a series of schools called Alpha School, originating out of Texas. They're now scaling. They've gotten a lot of press recently for having basically 2 hours of academic instruction, heavily AI based, so it's very iterative and personalized to the student. They're only spending 2 hours on academics. They're outperforming all of their peers, like by leaps and bounds. They spend the rest of their time in the day doing like projects and actual like hands-on activities and real world learning stuff. There's another group. The guy I know, Jeff Sandifer, started a group called the Acton Academy. It's a different type of private school based on the Socratic methods. So Arthur, to your point about critical thinking, there's no teachers, there's no top-down instruction. There's just kind of adult guides to facilitate discussion, but it's peer-led from the youth, and they're all figuring things out together. And so it's really good with critical thinking and, certainly homeschooling, a lot of resources out there. I get bullish where, look, I don't think the education system is going to transform in the next decade and those millions of kids are going to flee into private and homeschool environments. I think the system wants to defend the system, and the system will largely remain just as it has for the past century of kind of the status quo with marginal tweaking on the edges. But the abundance of these alternative options, the lowering of barrier to entry so that a single mom even can send her kid to a different environment. There's laws now passing like in Utah and several other states.
Choice, right?
Parents can, they can unlock the money that the state was spending on their kids' education, and they can put their kid in a private school, or they can do a homeschool co-op or whatever. So look, that's only ever going to be some percentage of the overall rising generation. But honestly, that's all you need to have your top thinkers and, innovators and everybody else. We just need an engine to produce
Create jobs too.
those type of people. Yeah.
So Daniel Pewter, interviewed him. He has a private school called Foundation Academies.
Okay.
And he, in certain states where he can get funded by the state, I think it's like $8,000 per student. He's managed to open, I think, 14 schools and has a 99% graduation rate. And so he's using that money for in underprivileged areas. That's his objective, but it's chipping away. It's happening. And so there are people that are getting those opportunities, students, getting the opportunities to participate in this. And I agree with you. The Department of Education is going to try to defend itself because everybody wants to keep their job, but it goes with the territory. It happens all the time.
Yeah. No, it's easy to get gloomy about that whole thing, but I'm kind of in the fray with a lot of these up and coming education models. And, they're doing well. They've got funding, they're scaling. It's really, exciting to see, particularly if we go back to like talking about the more family office type. A lot of them have always struggled. Like, do I hire tutors? Is there a private school? But the private schools are all, let's say, if you're more kind of conservative or free market minded, a lot of the private schools are very left. And they're hiring teachers who are very lefty, as well. And they're teaching anti-capitalist stuff. So the wealth creator is paying all this money for their kid to go to some private school, only to be brainwashed into like,
they come back to Thanksgiving dinner and they start squawking about all kinds of stuff. And you go, wait a minute, what just happened?
Exactly. Or certainly college is the same, right? You see a lot of that. So, there's so many opportunities on the horizon of people who are trying to solve those problems that, I think for in that context, the future's pretty bright.
Let's talk a little bit before we wrap things up about how people can help the cause on your end.
Sure. So I'm on a mission to scale what we're doing. I'll give you a couple examples. Tuttle Twins, the children's books, right? Great. We have millions of kids, reading about merit and free speech and property rights and free markets and entrepreneurship. There's millions more kids and schools that need this. And so we're working on scaling that. I briefly mentioned we have a youth entrepreneurship program. We launch events that are kind of like farmers markets, but they're run entirely by kids. So you could take, say, your grandkids, help them set up their booth and get everything arranged, but then you would have to sit back the entire time while they are front of stage talking to customers, counting the money, trying to attract customers to come to their booth. So we've been doing that program 8 years now. We just this year finished scaling nationally. We're now operating in every state. This year we'll launch around 1,000 of these events.
Wow.
We're looking to scale that up to about 5,000 events across the country per year, 500,000 kids per year, whereas this year it's 50,000. So, a lot of your viewers, excuse me, are, likely entrepreneurs themselves. And so a lot of our donors that are fueling that program are, I love kids, I love youth education, I love entrepreneurship, let's go do that. And no matter where folks live, so you can go to kidsmarkets.com and you can look up if we have markets near you, and we're always trying to launch more. So that's something to support. The Praxis thing, which is the higher education. So all of this operates under a nonprofit holding company, basically. So these are all kind of different business lines that we have, but they're all part of a nonprofit. And so again, to our earlier discussion, we're always trying to generate revenue to be as self-sustaining as possible, but we're always using philanthropy to either launch new stuff or scale what we're doing. And so for anyone watching on their philanthropic side, if that's of interest, and then obviously on the next gen stuff, we're a ways away from having that, but I'm easy to find online, to contact. Follow me on social and you'll stay kind of update with what we're doing. But libertas.org is our kind of parent organization where folks can find everything that we're doing. And if there's a particular program they're interested in or want to talk to us about, even whether it's for broader philanthropic purposes or for your own kids or grandkids, and hey, I want those books, libertas.org will kind of have links to all the different stuff that we're doing.
And you're well staffed, and so people can get to what they need.
Oh yeah, I mean, across our whole organization, gosh, we're probably getting close to 200 people on our team across all these different programs. And we've got basically 6 major different business lines that we're doing, different units. But yeah, we got people to help. We're all over the country. So, if you want to connect with anyone on our team, chances are we've got someone near you. But we're very easy to find online. And so if we can be of service to any of you watching and your families, we're happy to connect.
I super appreciate it. I really appreciate you sharing with everybody today. And of course, like I said, we were aligned in our first discussion, so it was really easy to have you, and I appreciate it. And please feel free, everybody, to reach out. Connor's, as he said, easy to get to. So it's, in my view, a noble effort, and I super appreciate that you're doing it, Connor.
Well, thanks for having me on, Arthur, to spread the good word, and appreciate your support.
You bet. My pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. Till next time, thanks. Bye-bye. You can hang in there.